I've never shared at a women's rap, so I really was hoping the other speaker went first so I can follow her lead. So I thought, okay, women's rap. I'll do a rap about women. My name is Annie, and I'm 52. Anyway, I guess what really is just to talk about, being a woman in recovery, and as women, as a woman, I have a lot of roles that I play. There's the wife, the mother, the grandmother, the aunt, the employee, the co-worker, and there's a lot of different roles. Now, we all play a role as a human being, and we all play a role as a recovering addict. So I thought I'd just talk more about our roles as women, I guess I'll talk about in NA, being a woman in NA. And, I have a home group, and I tease it, it's the boys club, because it's all men and me. But these are some men that they work steps, they have sponsors, they're not just clean, but they have some recovery. And what these men have taught me, and what they have taught me is value as a woman, that I have more to offer than just a piece of ass. Because when I got here, believe me, that's all I put out there, because that's all I thought I was worth. And I'm grateful that I was put around healthy men who didn't take advantage of my vulnerability, so I could learn that I had value as a woman, that I had something more to offer a man than that. So I'm grateful to the men of our program today because of that. They've played a big part of me learning real self-esteem and my real value as a woman. And then beyond that, I think we're all just addicts. When I was new, it was very important that I got with the women. I have 8 brothers, and so it's just natural for me to gravitate towards men because that's my comfort zone, Plus, thinking all I had to offer was ass, I didn't have that to offer the women, so I really had no value there, But now I'm really grateful to the women of the program because they also taught me that I have value and that I have something to offer, and that women do care about each other and they do love each other, and it isn't always about jealousy and competition and who's going to be on top, and that we can love and be equal. That, our relationship doesn't have to involve someone superior and someone inferior, that we are equal. So I'm grateful to the women in the program because they also added to me learning value as a human being. But it was very important in the beginning. And you know what? If those men had not been healthy, had they tried to help me in my recovery, I would have never reached out to the women because I would have just went there and got what I needed. And as much as we have some wonderful, beautiful men in this program with great recovery, they're not women. And they couldn't give me what I needed to learn how to stay clean and fill these other roles in my life because I had abandoned all them by the time that I got here. I no longer knew how to be a mother, no longer knew how to be a wife, no longer knew how to be a homemaker, a co-worker. I didn't have no women friends. Believe me, if you was hanging out with me, you had something I wanted and I was going to get it or take it. So I didn't know how to have those relationships, and it was only women that were going to be able to teach me that. And it's funny because I live in Mishawaka, and Mishawaka is in between South Bend and Elkhart, and I'd never been to Elkhart. And in South Bend, there weren't a whole lot of women there at that time. I mean, my first sponsor, because I was told I had to pick a woman, which I thought was outrageous. What does it really matter? But I was told that I had to find a woman, so I found the most popular woman because she had what I wanted. She was surrounded by the men in the program all the time, and that's what I wanted, and I asked her. Fortunately, I was desperate and sick and tired enough that wasn't working. And, the men kept telling me, go to Elkhart, Bonnie, go to Elkhart. And to me, Elkhart was 1,000,000 miles away. And finally, there was this one meeting I used to go to. I used to call it my little old man's meeting. And it was in the other fellowship, and it was all these little old men. And even they started telling me, Bonnie, go to Elkhart. Go find the women. We can't help you. Go find the women. And you know, I finally made it to Elkhart, and it was 5 minutes farther away than South Bend, you know. But I thought that it was a million miles. And I'll never forget walking into that meeting, and there's these two women there, and one of them's barefoot. And right then I felt I was at home. And they're scuffling about, making the coffee, and laughing and giggling, and you know, I really did feel relief from that, you know. And it still took time for me to find that sponsor, because my woman sponsor was going to be my age. She was going to have raised children with a tray under the couch like me, be married, you know, all these things in common with me, because that's who could help me. And it turned out the first person I asked to sponsor me, she was an 18-year-old. And I don't mean to blow her anonymity, but that girl had what I wanted. And what I wanted, I discovered from continuing to go to meetings. And we were in this meeting, they were all sharing about, oh, I don't want to use because I don't want to give up my 30 days or 60 days or 3 years. And it came around to her, and she says, I don't want to use because I finally feel good in my skin. I don't want to lose that. And that's when I knew what was wrong with me, that I did not know how to live in my skin. And that's what I wanted a sponsor to teach me, was how to live in my skin and be okay with myself. And you know what? Men couldn't have taught me that. You know, the men couldn't, even the greatest recovering men in our program could not have taught me that. I needed the women to teach me that, you know. And so I fell in love with women in the course of this program. And today, I can have healthy relationships with men because I know that I have more to offer, you know, that I have value as a human being. But I stuck pretty close to that, and I'm still, even today, with newcomer men, I send them to the men, you know, because I've been there and I know. And I'm so grateful to those men who sent me to the women, who said, go find the women, you know. So my sponsors have always been women. You know, and I have some good men friends in this program, and I get different things from them, and I love the men in my home group because it helps me sometimes in my marriage to hear things from a male perspective. You know, and then, okay, now talking about, you know, role as a wife. You know, we get here and we're told to stay out of relationships. We're not told, it's suggested, but as my first sponsor said, a suggested means you better fucking do it if you want to get clean, you know. So, but they're just suggestions. And so it's suggested that you stay out of relationships for a year. Well, let me tell you, even if you're married, all you get there is sex. You got to stay out of that relationship for the year. I had to leave that relationship alone. I had to quit trying to fix, manage, and control him. I had to quit trying to manipulate him to act the way I wanted to act. I'd call the women, he's blah, blah, and they'd like, what'd you do? I'd be like, well, what'd you do? I'm like, well, can't he be an ass? And they're like, well, yeah, but we can't do nothing about that. In recovery, we work on ourselves. We can't fix him. And so they taught me how to leave that alone. And at one point, I was so frustrated because you women would not let me fix my husband, because that's what was wrong. He needed fixing, that I was going to leave his ass. I'm leaving him. That's it. I can't live like this. And I'm grateful again, because you know what you women told me? You said, is he beating you? No. Is he cheating on you? No. Why don't you give it a year, Bonnie? If you want to leave him in a year, we'll come over and help you pack those bags. And I am so grateful, because at a year, then I was ready to work on my relationship with my husband, because I had been working on the relationship with myself and my sponsor and the God of my understanding. So now I'm ready to work on that relationship with him. And you know, me and my husband will celebrate 20 years in August. And we used, through our 14th wedding anniversary was our first one clean. So we used most of that marriage. We're going to have to be married quite a few more years to have spent more time together clean than using. And you know, we have been through some things. I mean, addiction is just one of the things. We've been through, our youngest son had cancer when he was 5, and went through that. We've been through house fires. We've been through not paying bills and getting evicted, through job losses, through teenage children getting people pregnant, and you know, we just have been through a lot. But what I've learned is you just stick it out. My role as a woman in that marriage is to do my part and let him do his part. And sometimes it takes a while before both those parts come together and we get to the other side of whatever that problem may be. You know, we have some stuff going on at home right now, which I know my husband's solution would be to throw these kids out. But I'm not there yet. So we're not going to do that yet, because that's something that we're going to have to come together and be together on that decision. We have very different method. We both want the same thing. We want this kid to get his shit together, but we have different method, you know. And so we just got to kind of leave each other with how they're working and playing it till we can come to something that will work for both of us, you know. So anyways, the biggest thing that I've learned about having a happy, healthy relationship is not only to leave him where he's at and let him feel and be who he is, all the while to remain where I'm at and be and feel who I am. You know how men will come home and they'll be an ass, and you just kind of smile and keep cooking dinner, and they'll keep being an ass, and then finally you just had it, and the bitch comes on, and then they look at you, why are you being such a bitch? You know, and it's because I've had enough of your ass. But it's funny how in recovery it takes longer for me to allow that to affect me. Sometimes it still does, because I'm human and my feelings do get hurt. And the difference is today, instead of just shutting down, I can say that. I can just come out and say, you know, you got about 5 more minutes of that bitching, and I'm going to be there. You know, because before I couldn't say open, honest things to my husband like that, because he might leave me, you know. And so I had to be guarded with being honest with my husband. I could only tell him what I thought he wanted to hear that would please him, and he'd stay there. Now, you'd think after all them years he wasn't going nowhere, but I was just, you know, because of a lack of self-worth, I was just waiting for the day that he was going to leave. Even, you know, he came to me, probably about 5 months before I got clean. And it's funny because he said to me, he says, you know, baby, you got a problem. He says, but I can't help you. He says, all I can do is stay here and stick it out as long as I can. I sure hope I'm here when you're ready for help. And that's all he said to me. And come to find out what it was is he went to my family. He's like, you know, she's using every day. She's spending all the rent money. She don't cook no food. The kids are... And my family, my mother, who's been married and divorced 3 times, said, well, pack her shit and put her in the street. You know? And then he looked at his family. His parents have been married for 57 years. And he decided at that moment that I'm not going to leave her yet. And you know what? I am so grateful. So grateful that he did not leave me. And, you know, even that day when I'd had enough and went to him for help, you better believe he was rolling his eyes thinking, okay, what is she trying to get out of me now? And, you know, I'll never forget him dropping me off at the treatment center. And, you know, even though you know, he don't know what the hell's going to go on. And I'll tell you, he really struggled with NA. How could you people help me? I didn't even know you. He couldn't help me, but you could. And you know, it took a lot. I have the greatest husband in the world, because I've seen women come here with husbands who just won't come to the dances with them, won't come to the Camp Mac with them, won't be a part of this. And my husband has always made that decision that there's not going to be any part of my life that's separate from his, that we are sharing a life together. And if this is what it's going to take for my wife to get better, then I'm going to be there with her. You know, so I'm a lucky woman. I am, you know, a blessed woman. Jolie's back there crying because she knows. But, so anyways, so that's a relationship, you know, as a wife. Okay, and then there's the mother. I'm a lousy mother. Okay, let's take that back. I'm a lousy at some things mother. I still have some guilt that I'm healing from. You know, it was our 5th child's 5th grade graduation we finally went to, not higher than Kai. Those children ran loose. believe me, I was excited at 3 months clean when my son actually opened the bedroom window and snuck it out, put the pillows underneath the blanket, and propped the door and snuck out of the house. Because before that, he could go out anytime he wanted to, because I was unavailable. That was victory. They're learning some boundaries, you know. And then my youngest son, you set a boundary. Ever since you've been in that damn NA, they got you brainwashed, he'll say, whenever he can't have his way, you know. But I still have guilt that I'm healing from there and still allowing things. And I know that it's my choice. You know, I have this son at home right now. He's 20 years old. He just won't work. He brought home a nice, young, pregnant teenage girl. And now I have this grandson there, and they're using dope every day. You know I have a choice. The choice is to throw them all out. The other choice is to do like my husband did and stick around as long as I can and hope they get some help. And that's what I'm choosing to do. And it's not easy. But in knowing who I am, some days I wish I could be that mom, and I've had this conversation with my son. Please don't make me be the mother who's got to drop you off at the homeless center and then come home standing behind a locked door crying as you're begging to come in and I can't let you in. Please don't make me be that mother, please. And you know what? It may someday come to that I got to be that mother, but I can be honest that I ain't there yet. Okay. So what's my other choice? My other choice is to get up like this morning or yesterday morning, gonna head here, and he's passed out on one couch, his girlfriend on another, the baby's in the little baby bed, my other son on the other, and there's a bag of dope on the table. You know? And to just take a deep breath, to get up and go to bed, you know? And it's hard sometimes. It's really, really hard. But I'm grateful to Narcotics Anonymous because you know what? I ain't getting high today. You know, the first thing I learned was, you know what, it's my problem. I went through that phase of I can't use so nobody else can, but I learned that I'm the one with the problem. And you know how my higher power chose to teach me that lesson in humility is I was a bartender from 6 months to 4 years clean. And that was humility. That was learning, you know, about the difference between my problem and someone else's problem, what I can do and what others can do, about my choices, about living happy, joyous, and free. You know what? I'm free to use anytime I want. That's always an option and always a choice. And just because I choose no doesn't mean I ain't making a choice. You know, recovery taught me that everything I do is a choice, and every choice has a consequence. Okay. You know, I no longer want the consequence. In fact, me and my husband, just the other night, we stopped in this little bar and had a hamburger. It was this big around. It was an 18-ounce hamburger. You know why we went in there? Because you can't smoke in my county anymore, and then we could go in there and smoke and have a hamburger. But we played pool, and it was funny. We were laughing because, boy, we just ain't been able to play pool since we got clean. We just can't. You know, and then we said, you know what, if we still drank, we'd hang out in that little bar. And then the conversation went to, boy, I'm glad we don't live that life anymore. This life we have today is so much better than we ever thought that was. Because we thought that was a great life, you know, when we were living it. It didn't, till the bitter ends, we didn't realize where that life took us till we were there. And it didn't work for us, you know. So I have that humility today, and I know I always have that choice. And I learned that through working the steps with a sponsor. You know, I know that I'm an addict today. I know that using is not a solution. It's always a choice, but it's not a solution. I have worked that first step, and I've wrote that evidence of where using took me, from joy to habit to necessity to desperation. And I don't need to go there anymore. There's nothing in my life today that is so bad that that's the solution. You know, that's not going to make anything better. And believe me, I ain't always happy with that. If I could crawl in bed at night and smoke a little hoop with my husband, I'd love it. But you know what? Then I'd be smoking in the morning. I'd be smoking in the afternoon. I'd be smoking in. Now I got to find ways and means to get more because I'm smoking 24/7 again, and I'm back in that, and I just don't want to go back there. You know, this life is just too good today to do that. You know, and then I might have already taken up my time. I don't know where I'm at because they took that clock down. So, but I guess the last area would be as a coworker. And learning, and this is something else I learned in Narcotics Anonymous. I guess the value I have as a human being. And to go to my job and not feel like I got to be better, not feel like I'm worse, but just doing the best I can to leave other people where they're at. I used to try to go in there every day and just smile, good morning, good morning. And there are some people who just hate their lives. And they want everybody around them to hate their lives too. And part of taking care of me was learning that, what? I don't need to waste my good mornings on them. There's plenty of other people at work that love their lives. That doesn't mean I need to be rude, but it just means I don't need to waste my energy there, to save that for people who are good morning back to me. And how to let people do the job the way they're going to do it, whether I think it's right or wrong. And to just focus on what I need to get done. And I haven't had to quit a job since I started behaving that way at work. I've been able to maintain employment. I've just got, in fact, God has been so good to me. And I don't think, I guess, my relationship with God, I guess I need to touch on that for a minute. And this is what the steps have taught me. This is not what Narcotics Anonymous. Narcotics Anonymous, I work the steps, but this is what working the steps have taught me is, God just wants me to be happy. And how do I be happy? Well, by trying to do the next right thing. And notice I say trying. Trying to practice these spiritual principles. Because you know what? I feel good when I do that, and I am happy. That's the result. So it's not about, I don't believe for one moment it was ever God's will for me to go out there and use dope for all them years. That was my choice. Just like today. I believe it's God's will for me to use. I'll hear somebody say, well, come this August, God willing, I'll have 5 years. God is already willing. I'm the one that's got to be willing. If I'm willing, I'll celebrate that next year's token. And that's what I always have to remember when it comes to my relationship with God. God is already willing. I'm the one that's got to be willing. I'm the one that's got to be willing to make those changes. You know what? I'm the one who's got to be willing to throw that son out in the street and quit enabling him, and I ain't there yet. And I know that God is willing. He wants my son to be happy too. I don't believe that God picks and chooses who's going to get clean and who's going to die from the horrors of addiction. I think if God would have us all clean and all recovering, but some of us just don't choose that. It's that wonderful blessed curse called self-will. And that's where recovery taught me about personal responsibility. Self-will can be a blessing, but the curse is the personal responsibility. That's where all my freedom comes from, by accepting personal responsibility. Because you know what? Now that I know that that's a key to freedom, I think about that sometimes before I make choices. Because I think about the consequences and what am I willing to do. So, okay, now I know I've got to be way over time.
Yeah,
So.
I know.
Huh?
It says 5 minutes, a few minutes. Yeah, you're about time.
Okay. Anyways, I am just so grateful to be here. And when they said the women's rap, and I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, we do that little women's thing where we'll get together in someone's cabin and we'll rap, and it's always funny because, like, the first 20 minutes is kind of uncomfortable, and we're all checking each other out, and then we get to where we start sharing, and somebody will just lay it down. Next thing you know, all the me too, yeah, and we really bond, and we come together, and we know that we're all feeling the same thing. Like, why am I hiding this from you? You're feeling the same thing. If you're not feeling it now, you were feeling it a while ago, and you can tell me how to get through it. So I don't need to fear you women anymore. You are on my side. So anyways, that's all I got.
Next speaker is Sharita. Am I saying that right? Sharita, help me welcome Sharita.
Thank you. My name's Sharita and I'm an addict. Hello. I'm really grateful to be here, and I love Camp Mac. I come every year. It's like a miracle, a gift from God for me to survive whatever has happened throughout my life before this time, and then get here and share with you guys all about it. You know, the secret meetings she talked about, behind the podium, however it gets out, it just gets out there. And I'm really grateful. I'm grateful I didn't find out that I had the willingness to do this workshop until yesterday. And, but she said I must have marked it off on the willingness box, and it was Bonnie. I met Bonnie, and Bonnie, I told her my name. She was like, "Oh yeah, you're Clarita." I was like, "No, I'm Sharita. It's somebody else doing the workshop." But I found out it was me, and I'm grateful. It's like, oh, somebody's doing it. But I'm really grateful to be here, you know, at the Women's Rep. We do, you know, try to get together. I think it's a great idea that they decided to do it as a workshop, because we definitely, and we probably still will have that meeting that Bonnie was talking about later. But a couple of things came to my heart about women, being a woman in recovery. And my experience has been, and it's been through writing the steps a couple of times, that when women come into recovery, I need to remember that women do what they do for a reason. And I know when I first got here, you know, if you weren't like me, or if you dressed different, or if you were obnoxious, or if you cussed too much, you know, I found it kind of easy to just kind of go in the other direction. But today I know better than that. You know, today I know that everybody has a story to tell, and we know, you don't know, you know, what I have been through to perhaps make me the way that I am. And so as we keep coming back, you know, we just begin to transform, especially in my area. One of the things that I used to see a lot of the women prostituted themselves, you know, in the streets. And so we have to be really, really fragile with them when they come into the rooms, you know, really lighten up on that judgmental, you know, how people dress in, if they, you know, if the clothes are too skimpy, whatever the case may be. Just, it would be so useful, I believe, to the new member, and I have begun to practice this, to put a pause, hopefully a hold, but I ain't gonna say I don't judge people, but to put a pause on that judgmental mentality, because you just don't know. And as we, you know, we say it so freely, keep coming back, keep coming back. And if people get a chance to keep coming back, then they'll see how we do it, and, you know, they might see somebody that they can connect with, and then we just watch the miracle begin to happen. So, you know, I really want to encourage us, as well as myself, to take it light on the newer women, you know, that come into the rooms. And even with the if you came into the rooms and, you know, you really know how to manipulate men really good and things of that sort, and if you have a man, you know, we want to make sure that we're not shunning them because of that, because I really don't think that it's intentional. I think it's a habit that people have, and when they come in here, you just can't expect people to just stop, just, you know, don't do that, this my man kind of deal. And just know that if the women keep coming back, that this too shall pass. And so that was a pretty challenging thing for me when I first got clean, because the area that I live in Kalamazoo, and my husband and I, we moved from Georgia to Kalamazoo, and he was born and raised in Kalamazoo. And when we moved to that area, everybody was just so friendly to him. Everybody know his nickname was Babaloo back in the day. Everybody knew him, and I almost didn't have a name for like 2 years. I was either old girl from Georgia or, you know, something else that they were calling me. And to be quite frankly, I did not feel extremely welcome when I first got here. You know, I was almost kind of, you know, I was grateful that they knew him, and I stayed because I had been beaten down so bad. By the grace of God, you know, nobody was able to run me out of the rooms, but it was not this loving, oh, I'm so glad you made it. People were definitely judgmental. When I came into the program, I had already obtained my 2 degrees, but you know what? It didn't matter. I was tore up like everybody else, and I wasn't greeted with love because of that. And so today, I really love the newcomer. You know, it amazes me when I see them just kind of transform, and over the years. And this one lady in particular, we went to lunch, or we went to dinner last week before the meeting, and it was just amazing to just see her. Used to be in such a hopeless state of existence, and now she tells me how the program is working for her. It's just absolutely mind-blowing. One, for Maya to have stayed long enough to witness it, and for her to have stayed long enough to experience it. So I wanted to definitely share that as far as the women, newer women coming into the program. I also wanted to touch on friendship and trust. I think it's kind of funny, when we come into the rooms and we often say, we don't trust women, And I think that's so funny because I think about how many times I copped and I didn't know who you were.
Okay.
I know who you were, I know what you giving me, none of that. But I get into the program and I get a little bit of focus going on, and all of a sudden I don't trust nobody I can see, And so, I just think that that's really strange, and I think that we need to give ourselves a break when it comes to that. I have had times that I have trusted and been violated in the rooms, but never in a way that I was violated when I was out there getting high. So you might run into some situations where you tell somebody you really, really, you hope to God that they won't share that with somebody else, but guess what? If they do, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay, I learned a lesson. I won't be sharing with you. I'll be sharing with you this time, and then just keep. But we have to keep trying. We have to keep trying, because if I stay in this program and I just stop pointing out all the people that I can't trust, I'm the one that get hurt behind that. Because what the disease would love for us to do is to not tell you this, not tell you that. And my experiences, the moment my disease starts sectioning off what I need to share and what I don't need to share, I'm doomed. Because I get confused. I don't know what to say or, what not to say. And once I start thinking too hard about what to say and not to say, it's usually not even the truth by the time it come out. So that's real important. And someone you can tell it all to. Now I have a friend like that. She is actually not in the program. We were actually in kindergarten together, and we have been friends over all these years. And I remember when I was very, very active in my addiction, and I was homeless. And I was not the girl that she knew growing up, so I'm sure I was blowing her mind when I would call her, I ain't have a place to stay sometimes, or I needed money. I would do all that I could not to hustle my dear friend. But there were times that I didn't have a hustle, so I would have to call her to get money. And so I just really thank God that we have been friends over the entire years. And she still don't even get it all the way. I heard somebody saying that people think you're in a cult and stuff like that. My sisters would often say stuff like that to me. And my friend, her name is Tanya. I ain't breaking her anonymity because she ain't in the program. But Tanya, last year we went to this place in Chicago. It's like a club, but it's owned by a recovering addict. You guys from Chicago, the Joyful Noise. And Tanya went there with me, so she went to this party with me for the first time. And I have been in recovery for 12 years, and Tanya knows all about the hugging and all of that. But we went there, and the folks started hugging on Tanya. She was like, whoa, wait a minute. And she's a police officer, so she really ain't down with the touchy-feely stuff, right? But, I just really thank God that I can call Tanya and I can tell her absolutely everything under the sun. I want to be honest and say that in the rooms, I tell you all of this, and then I'll tell you the rest, and I'll tell you some, and it has nothing to do with you and you and you. It's me, that have not got to a comfortable level that I really want to be able to tell you absolutely everything and be able to be okay with that. I don't want to be obsessing in my mind later. Dang, I probably shouldn't have told her that. Oh, Lord, I really shouldn't have told her that. And so, but I'm working on that. And this last year and a half, has definitely been a year that I have been doing definitely some risky sharing, because I'm transitioning in my life. I'm growing, I'm changing. And my husband would always say that I was going to get to a certain point. He said, you're going to get to a certain point where you go through phases and all this stuff. And I was like this happy bumblebee in recovery. I was like, oh, no, that'll never happen to me. No, I don't think so. I'm just going to be peaceful in recovery, and that's the deal. Well, of course, y'all know that wasn't the case, right? And so things began to happen as I was writing my steps, and more so it showed up in my journaling, because when I'm journaling, that's when I can do my most trustworthy sharing. I can write it all. No, I ain't got to hold nothing back. I can write absolutely everything. And sometimes it's safer for me to do that, because I could have some really insane stuff going on in my head. And before I introduce it to somebody else, I probably want to write it down first, just to kind of see how it sounds. But I like to hang around women who energize me. I like to hang around women, not that you owe me any energy, but I do have some people that sometimes I feel like I need a nap after being in their presence. That's just the truth. It's some people I just feel really tired, and I feel like there's a certain part of me that has a calling to women like that, but that's not what my entire circle consists of, because recovery is a two-way street, and you got to give some to get some, and I just can't be the one that gives. And that was definitely me at one point in my recovery, and I was not doing it intentionally, but I'm assertive and outgoing and all this stuff, and I always knew how to give. And then when I got to a point that I was absolutely broken, I was so used to being the giver, people didn't even really know how to give to me. They didn't know what to do, and I sure as heck didn't tell them. I didn't know what to tell them that I needed, because I had never been in that position before. So that was very, very humbling. I remember my sponsor at the time, she said, now when you get off the phone, because it was a real traumatic year for me that year, and she said, I was learning how to actually be a human being all over again, because I was a human doing for so many years, doing this, doing that, on the board, all this stuff I was doing, and when God just wiped all that stuff off the table, oh my God, I didn't know what to do or how to be. And I remember my sponsor told me, she said, okay, now when we get off the phone, just chill out, just chill out, just sit down on the couch. And I hung up the phone. I was like, who she think she is? Like I'm in the 8th grade or something, just sit down and chill out. And then as soon as I hung up, I started wiping off the table and doing all kind of stuff. And then it hit me. I was like, oh, she meant cool out. And I needed her to tell me that. I really needed people to actually tell me how to be, because I didn't know what to do with myself. And I thank God for the women in the program who have dared to step in that gap and do that for me. I love life. I like to celebrate life. I like to talk about my issues. I like to talk about challenges. And one of the things that I find, not necessarily in just the recovery world, but in the world in which they are not recovery, but I realize sex is like a subject that people don't like to touch. And so I just turned 40 this year, and what I wanted to do for my 40th birthday, and I'm still going to do it, but my birthday is in February and it was too cold, and I got people coming from all over, so we're going to do it this summer. But I'm going to have a certain amount of women come together, and what we're going to have is called a sex summit. And guys, you took the risk in coming in here, so anyway. We're going to have a sex summit, and basically what we're going to do, and what I do with some of my friends today, we talk about sex. You would just absolutely be amazed at how many women, even women who have had children, who've never had an orgasm. They've never had one. And it's not because stupid or ignorant or nothing like that. Some people have just never been taught. Some people, especially back in the day, women were designed to pleasure men, And so I was telling my mother, that's what we were going to do. And 2 years ago, I took my mother to see Vagina Monologue. She called me a pervert after that. She was like, she don't know why anybody want to go up and sit and hear what kind of play is that. And so we went through all that. But when I was having this conversation with her about the sex summit, she was like, what on earth would make some people get together and want to talk about that? And you know what? I love my mother, and she's one of my best friends. And I told her, it's your fault. I don't remember my mother having an in-depth conversation with me about sex and touching and feeling. And it wasn't because she was a bad mother, but I'm sure it was because the way she was brought up. Touching does not always equal sex. And as women, we need to be able to talk about the kind of touches we like, who we like to touch us. Some people like women to touch them. Some people like a couple of guys at the same time to touch them. But sex is. Hey, I got something to back it up. Wait a minute now. It says here. I mean, you know, the literature and Who's an Addict, it basically says we come in here, you know, mentally and emotionally and just pretty much on ground zero. It says higher mental and emotional functions such as conscience and ability to love were sharply affected by our use of drugs. Living skills were reduced to animal level. Our spirit was broken. The capacity to feel human was lost. This seems extreme, but many of us have been in this state of mind. And so my experience was when I came into the program, it was all about learning how to live and working the steps and, you know, how do I apply them in my day-to-day life, like Bonnie shared, you know, being a wife, being a stepmother, being a coworker, how do I apply that? But actually, I never really learned until recently here, how do I apply that to my sex life? Because I'm outgoing, I'm assertive, and I'm all of that stuff, but I'm not the kind of person that, and you know, I love friends that, you know, that say they know how to tell a dude, do it right here and do it like that and all that kind of stuff. I'm not a shy person, but I don't have that ability to do that, and I didn't know how to do that, and so I would just kind of enjoy my friend. I was like, for real, girl? You just tell it? Wow. And so I'm learning, you know, my husband and I, we are really, really good friends, and I mean, we work hard to become good friends. And some of you guys know my husband. He is not here. He stopped coming about 3 years ago when it rained and it was cold. And Rob was like, nah, you on your own with that. I ain't coming out in the woods. You on your own. He'll do a little drive-by, but that's it. But anyway, Robert and I are good friends. We just got to a point to where we can talk about anything. I mean, absolutely anything. Like, if I think this dude is sexy over here, I can say to him, man, that's looking kind of, and he can do the same thing. But now what I have learned is men can't take as much as they give out. You know? Now, I can't say that too many times. You know, this is funny. This is what my husband always say when I say, man, that brother, no, he looking good. And I don't know if any of you guys read the book, but my husband always say, he on the down low. That's his favorite line. If I think somebody cute and sexy, he's sweating down low. And so, you know, we have been having this conversation and we've been talking a lot about sex. And even though we have made an honest, conscious decision to put everything out there, it's still very difficult for me to be able to get the words out. Or part of my fear is, you know, I don't want him to feel like he's not doing a good job. You know, I believe that I even got these pajamas that say, hello, my name is high maintenance. I'm definitely high maintenance, that's without a doubt. And so we've been doing a lot of talking around that. We even had the conversation about same-sex relationships. And you know, we talked about that, and it pretty much came up when the Download book came out. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with that book, but a gentleman wrote a book about men who do not consider themselves gay, actually having sex with themselves and still having a family and sex with men. And so, you know, we began to talk about it from there, and he asked me the question, had I ever entertained the thought of another female touching me? And I told him, yeah, I had. Now, what my ego wanted to say was, I'm getting ready to go, no. Like, I'm going to my grave with that, you no, I ain't never. But you know what? It was so much freedom in being able to say that to him, because it gave us a chance to explore. It gave us a chance to talk about, and when we open those kind of subjects up, everything that we're going to talk about pertaining to that, it doesn't necessarily come to the table at that time, but we open the door. And so now, when we sitting at this restaurant chilling, a whole month later or something like that, we begin to finish that conversation, or he feels free to tell me about something and I feel freer. And so I believe women are just dynamic creatures. And our ability and our strength is just absolutely mind-blowing. And I don't mean to take anything away from men, but I just really want to say that I don't think men can begin to imagine just how strong women are. Just how strong women are. And I mean, I've been through some stuff where I just felt like I was hit by a bus. I just wanted to check out in life. And you still gotta wake up, you gotta go to work, you gotta cook, you gotta feed your animals, feed your kids, you gotta do all of this stuff and still manage to deal, with those issues. I'm dealing with this real challenging thing on my job, and my husband, he is Mr. Positive about absolutely everything, and I've really gotten some great acceptance about that, because he used to really irritate me with how happy he is. And I was slipping into it when I talked to him at work Thursday, because they just gave me this offer that's actually an insult to my intelligence, and they gave me 90 days to think about it. So it's very difficult to go in there with a straight face, still produce like I produce. And so I talked to my husband, and we have a management meeting at work every Thursday, and he said, "How you doing?" I said, "I'm hanging in there, I'm hanging in there. I'm doing pretty good." Because some days are better than others. But on the day that I had a management meeting where I got to look at all these people, and, I'm an addict, let me tell her, oh, y'all got something to do with it. When it's not that way, but that's how I'm feeling when I got to go to this meeting. But he said, they going to tell you, they going to make this big announcement, like I'm going to be the CEO. He just come up with the most outrageous stuff. And they going to have this position, and you're going to be all of this. And so the way I began to deal with it is, as a female, we could put our emotions out there. Boom, I could just tell him, you need to be quiet, and I ain't feeling that right now, and just go all into it. But I didn't do that. I just quiet my spirit and accept the fact that I appreciate him being really positive, but it's not changing how I'm feeling in the moment. So I didn't want to snatch him off his horse in that moment. But he said, well, call me after the meeting. So I said I'll call him after the meeting, and I did not rush to call him because I knew wasn't nothing spectacular getting ready. And I'm not saying that I'm wavering on my faith, but I work at this place. I know they ain't getting ready to make this superhero announcement he was talking about. So I finally did end up talking to him, and I was calmer. And I said, I really appreciate you being positive. And this is really growth for me as a woman, because what I knew how to do was to get my stuff out emotionally. I knew how to check people very easily. That was my defense. But to have an intellectual conversation with you, to communicate to you how I feel without getting indignant and crying and snobbing and all of that. And so I said, I appreciate, what you were trying to do earlier, but I need to say that there are times that I come and go with this situation that's going on, and I was having a bad moment at that time, and that's okay. You deal with stuff the way you deal with it, and I deal with stuff the way that I deal with it, and so I was grateful that I was able to do that without really victimizing him, because while he was feeling all happy, I know how to tell him off and change his mood, and I know how to do all of that really quick, just rearrange his whole demeanor real quick. And my husband, he don't like arguments and stuff like that. In fact, I really believe that if it wasn't for me, we wouldn't have no issues at all. But he didn't want to deal with nothing. It's just a beautiful day, let Robert tell it. And when I would read books, read books and journal and stuff like that, it got to the point in the program my husband would say, "Okay, now remember, you reading that book for you, okay?" Because I read stuff on the personality, the different types, and all that kind of stuff. And then when I get done, you a S, you a D. I just got it all worked out. And Rob was like, "Okay, now you keep hope alive for yourself, because that is something that you're doing." And I had to really get some acceptance with that. I respect his process, and he respect mine. And being a woman in recovery, he has always been very encouraging to me. In the beginning, when I first came around, I don't think he knew how to be encouraging for me. Excuse me, because like I said, the majority of the people in the program were his friends. And so there were a lot of times that I felt like he was siding with them. Don't be siding with them. None of them like me. I would just be going through this whole dilemma about none of them like me. and things of that sort. And because he's such a happy person, when I would say people were siding against me, he would try to pull the positive out of it. Well, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear the positive aspect of it. I want you to side with me and say, yeah, they all full of it. And you know, but he wouldn't do that. And so, you know, as a woman in recovery, it's my hope that I have created an atmosphere with the women in my life where they feel comfortable talking to me about just about anything, be it sex, be it love, be it fear, whatever the case may be. I believe that we should be able to do that in recovery. I do believe that people who suffer from sex addictions, it's just been what I have witnessed in the program. Sometimes it is best that you pull another woman to a side when you say, you know, I'm an nymphomaniac or I got a sex addiction, because you can really continue to be victimized when you do that. So, you know, I really want to say it's not a bad thing to be a sex addict. I want to say that it's very challenging when you kind of put certain things out there. We as women have, you know, just been violated in so many ways. And it's a wonderful thing if we can create an environment for people to be able to comfortably say, hey, you know, that happened to me and I'm just feeling this way about it. And the last thing that I want to close with that I learned that I was doing in my relationship with my friends, my mates, and everybody else, when we don't stay in the step writing process, one of the things we'll do is we'll bring all that baggage of those unresolved issues into the here and now, and it will definitely sabotage the happiness that we could very well be sharing. So I'm grateful for all the women and the men that came to this workshop. I believe being a woman is a very, very powerful thing to be. Guys are great. It's powerful to be a woman in recovery. It's challenging to be a woman in recovery. It is just absolutely not easy. And so I hope that you can pull somebody to the side. You can talk about sex. You can talk about orgasms. You can talk about sexual fantasies, whatever it is you feel like you need to talk about, because you would be surprised at somebody else who has that same situation and will love to be able to know that there's somebody out there just like me. And if any of y'all know me, it's not a whole lot I won't talk about, so feel free to pull me to the side. Thanks for listening.